2 for the sample remix project. For step 2, we're going to be finding loops and samples that sound good together and organizing our clips into horizontal rows and naming our horizontal rows. So let's talk about what that means. First of all, before we get onto that, let's go back down and look at this rubric. There's a couple things on here about the horizontal rows. So you can see this is 10 of your points right here is doing this. And this is, I'm actually going to cover a few extra steps in this tutorial too, just to show you some different things you can do. But these are all the sounds that I have found so far that I think I want to try and work with. And we can always add more to the list, but I did start with drums and bass. I've got 3 different drums and bass sounds. I've got some or electric piano sounds that I found I like, the guitar, some percussion things, there's a congos and a cowbell thing, and then some flute samples that I really like. So this next step, what you want to try and start doing is lining up sounds that sound good together. And I've actually already started doing that, but I just want to kind of show you what I mean by that. Horizontal meaning like this way. And what we're doing with lining up the samples this way is you can actually trigger all of the samples in a row at once. If you go all the way over to your master track over here and push play, then it will play all the samples in that line at the same time. It'll cue those up, right? And if I come down here and click on this one, you can see it's playing those drums, that bass, that guitar, the congas, the flutes. And I can switch to different samples, and those can still keep on playing if I want. But you can see how when you trigger from the master, it plays everything in that row, and it's a really good way to make a big transition between different songs. And this is how live DJs use Ableton a lot, is that they will line up different samples like this, and then if they want to make a big change in the song, they'll come over to the master track and hit play. And if they just want to change one sample at a time, they can just hit play on that one sample. You've probably already run into some frustrations as far as different samples playing at different times and things like that. So if you want to turn off any tracks, just not have them play while you're checking out some other things, just hit the stop button at the bottom of each of those tracks, and that will stop all the queuing up that's going on, right? And then as far as moving things around goes horizontally, just click on a sample and move it to a new spot, right? And then if you wanted these ideas all to go together, then have those all in a solid row. Part of my reasoning for organizing it like I have right here is this section, I actually want to use each of these chords separately, so it's going to kind of cycle through each of these. These are just some one-shot samples, and I want them to play in that order. And then this is another section where I've got these different flute samples, and I want to alternate between these flute samples. And then here's another section right here. So I've got about 3 sections right now. And if you look on the rubric again, I'm looking for, when we get the final song done, it's going to be about a minute long, and it should have a good intro, a good outro, and at least 2 other contrasting sections. So kind of be thinking about that as you're pulling it together. You want maybe 2 really good solid ideas, and then with those 2 solid ideas, you can probably come up with a good intro and outro, depending on just what you have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start naming some parts here. So this actually on the bottom here was what I was thinking about using for my intro. So I'm going to come over here to where it says 10 and right click on it, and again we're just going to rename it, but I'm going to name this one intro. So I know that this is my intro idea. And once you name it, you can also click and it would make sense to have your intro be on top. And you can see when I moved that, all of the samples that were on that line also moved up with it. So that's kind of nice. So that's my intro, and then let's say this is this is going to be my second section of the song. I think I'm going to do, well, I'm not sure yet. We'll just call this section A, and we'll call this section down here B. And then I'm for an outro, I'm not sure yet, but I think I'm probably going to just take some pieces of this that I have and we'll make them work. I'll show you some tricks on that when we get there. So that's it to naming your horizontal rows and organizing. It's pretty straightforward, but I wanted to show you a couple other cool editing tricks that you can do. One of them here is this. So I've got this guitar part that I brought in, And one thing that you want to check with each of your samples when you bring them in, make sure that the warp function and the loop function are turned on. Unless it's a sample that you only want to play once. If you only want it to play once, like these piano chords that I have here, they're not warped and looped because I only want them to play one time when I bring them in. But anything that you want it to like keep playing and sync up with the drums and bass and other things like that, make sure that the warp and the loop functions are turned on. And you can find that out just by clicking on the sample, and you can see what it's set to. Okay. Um, as I mentioned before, Ableton does all this really cool stuff where it automatically adjusts the speed of your samples so that it will sync up with whatever you have up here. But sometimes you want it to maybe play twice as fast as that, or maybe half as fast as that, because it will still sync up with the beat, but it will be like a faster thing. And this guitar part really made me think about that. So here's what the guitar part sounds like normally. So it's cool. It's kind of just one of those wiki wacky kind of parts, like a rhythmic type of thing. But I want it to go twice as fast. If you listen to this part here, I'm going to kind of turn everything else down so we can hear that guitar a little bit more, because it's kind of buried right now, but you can kind of hear it. So what I want to do is I want that to go twice as fast, actually. And how to do that, in this section right here where you've got the warp, there is a divide by 2 and a times by 2. Now, intuitively, I would think like, times by 2, that would make it go twice as fast. But what times by 2 actually does is it stretches out the loop to be twice as long. And so it actually makes it go half as fast. So you actually want to divide by 2. And that's going to make the loop shorter, which means it's going to play back faster, right? So I'm going to put it back to how it was. And listen. And then I'll divide it by 2. Kind of hear that? So now it's a little bit more funky, I think. I'm going to turn back up the volumes of everything else. And that's another thing that you might want to kind of mess around with too. Some of these loops, when you drop them in, are going to be kind of loud, and others are going to be kind of quiet. And it may, you may want to have certain ones be louder than others. And so, like maybe my flutes, I don't want to be quite as loud. You can adjust that by just turning down the track, and that's why it's helpful to have only one kind of instrument on each track. But let's say I just wanted to turn down this sample, but I want to leave this sample nice and loud. Well, you can turn down individual samples by just clicking on it and coming over here in the middle section where it says sample. There's a little volume adjuster right here, and this will only affect the volume of that one clip. So you can see, like, I turn it down, it gets quieter, turn it up, it gets louder. So you can individually kind of adjust some of these so that it's a more balanced sound in general. Let's see what that sounds like now. While you're at it, kind of keep an eye on your meters over here. You can see I was going in the red sometimes, so I know like I am going to need to bring down my mix a little bit when we get to this final step. So just kind of keep an eye on that as we'll adjust those details later on too, but it's a good thing to kind of keep in mind as you're working on things. So basically that's it as far as just getting things organized this way. And the next step, we're going to start taking some of these ideas and moving them over to this screen, and then I'll show you actually how to start getting your song being how you want it. So tune in to the next video.